Hello and welcome into the Take the North podcast, along with Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune. I'm Mark Grote from The Score, and it happened. It happened. The Chicago Bears, after yet another embarrassing loss in Detroit, this one on Thanksgiving Day, head coach Matt Eberflus was fired. Thomas Brown promoted to the interim head coach. Of course, Brown had been the offensive coordinator for the fired Shane Waldron. Let me, before we really get rolling on this podcast here, Dan, I want to read what the Bears sent us on the beat, specifically their language and just how they put it and how they handled it. And we'll get into more about how they handled things today. But the for immediate release, Friday, November 29th, 2024, headline: Chicago Bears relieve Eberflus of duties, elevate Brown. The Chicago Bears announced that Matt Eberflus has been relieved of his duties as head coach. Thomas Brown has been elevated to interim head coach. Here now is a quote from general manager Ryan Poles. He says the following, quote, "This morning, after meeting with George and Kevin," that'd be George McCaskey and Kevin Warren, "we informed Matt Eberflus of our decision to move in a different direction with the leadership of our football team and the head coaching position," said Chicago Bears general manager Ryan Poles. "I thank Matt for his hard work, professionalism, and dedication to our organization. We extend our gratitude for his commitment to the Chicago Bears and wish him and his family the best moving forward," said Poles. So close that out. Here now is a graph quote from Kevin Warren, the team's CEO, president. Quote, "I support Ryan and the decision that was made this morning. We understand how imperative the head coaching role is for building and maintaining a championship caliber team, leading our players and our organization. Our fans have stood by us and persevered through every challenge, and they deserve better results. Yes. Our organizational and operational structure is strong, focused, aligned, and energized for the future," said Chicago Bears president and CEO Kevin Warren. Then they go on to say a bunch of nice things about Thomas Brown, the interim head coach. But here we are, Dan. It was so bad. It got so bad that the Bears did something that they have never done in their 105-year history, something that they did not want to do. It probably pained the McCaskies. It probably pained, I don't know about Kevin Warren, but it probably pained a lot of people in that building to do what they did today, and that was to fire the head coach, Matt Eberflus. So I don't know, I don't want to give them credit for doing it, but thank God they did do what was essential to do on this day in firing Matt Eberflus.
I like the wording of that statement from Kevin Warren that you just read, which is, I support Ryan in the decision that I basically told him he had to make.
Do you think that's what it was? Do you think that was a little push?
I certainly think that there was certainly some conversation that was pretty direct and emphatic. I think, look, like we witnessed that whole thing on Thursday afternoon, Mark. Like the Bears front office, Ryan Poles, Ian Cunningham, Trey Koziel are sitting right above us in the press box. They are standing on their feet when that clock runs out at Ford Field, and the looks on their faces were the looks of people that had just witnessed a gnarly car accident. You know what I mean? And it was still like that when we were in the tunnel outside the visiting locker room and when we got into the press conferences with Matt Eberflus and Caleb Williams. It was like you had watched something that you should not have witnessed, right? Like it was that bad. And so now you're like, okay, there's only one way that this ends. We talked about it on the postgame pod. Matt Eberflus was done. We didn't know when it was going to happen, but we knew it was going to happen. And it happened through that statement you read at 11:58 this morning. Officially is when the Bears released that news. Obviously, the national insiders had intel on it a little bit before that, not much before that. And so I've got several questions. The so now what question is one we can wait a few minutes to address. My first question to you is, obviously, it's significant that it happened. How it happened. Does it matter to you? Does it matter to you how Friday morning was handled by the Chicago Bears with Matt Eberflus going on his regularly scheduled day after game Zoom call with reporters, having to go through the charade for 9 minutes of saying that he's preparing for the 49ers. And then before he gets to lunch in the cafeteria at Haugh Hall, he's told, hey, come see us. We need you to get a few boxes and get your crap out of here.
Yeah. I've got questions for sure. For absolutely. And to take it back even further, there's a group of us reporters that are on a text chain with Bears media relations, and we were asking, somebody on the chain asked, hey, where's the Zoom link? I still don't think there was an answer for that. I mean, all of a sudden it popped up a couple of minutes before, but we had no response from the Chicago Bears on what was going on. Hey, just follow it blindly. Keep, obviously we're all refreshing our email because that's where it's going to come down, but we received zero answer. Dan, the only rationale I can come up with, and this is probably just really grasping at straws, and why I'm doing it, I'm not really sure, is the only thing I could think of is that they gave Matt Eberflus a choice. Do you want to go talk about this one more time? Do you want to finish out the string? Would you like to go address these guys one more time? Because if that's not what happened, then it was ridiculous what they put Matt Eberflus through.
My question is was there still some resistance from somewhere within the power structure of actually pulling the trigger on this thing and making sure that the plug was pulled and it was over and done with? And so there's a lot of details that may or may not matter that would be helpful of knowing how that tug of war went inside the building, if it went at all, And so, look, like the style of the firing is what it is. I'm a little bit surprised that neither Kevin Warren nor Ryan Poles chose to take questions today. This is the first in-season firing of a head coach in the 105-season existence of the Chicago Bears. You would think there would be more than just a statement sent via email to kind of explain how you reach this conclusion, to kind of talk about what your plans are going forward in what is without question going to have major ripple effects to how the team functions for the final 5 games of the season, including a rookie quarterback in Caleb Williams, who just got to know his offensive coordinator, who's now going to be pulled into different directions to go oversee defense and special teams and game management and injury reports and all the other things that come with being a head coach that now are also on Thomas Brown's plate 17 days after he transitioned into the role of offensive coordinator. There's a mess here, and the mess needs explanation. And we've got nothing more than what you read at the outside of this episode to clarify what's going on inside the walls there.
If it was Ryan Poles, that I assume that's who you think maybe was the last man standing for Matt Eberflus. Is that
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, number one, Ryan has obviously been a major supporter of Matt and
yes.
thinks very
highly. It would make sense.
He thinks very highly of who he is. I also don't know what ownership thought. I don't know what George McCaskey's input on any of this was, saying like, look, we've never done this before. You've talked about it before, that like sometimes there's a traditional resistance to doing something they've never done before. And so like, I don't know how those lines of communications flowed and how they ultimately resulted in that press release that came out at 11:50.
I would, if that is the case, and I don't know if we're going to find out, because I imagine when we ask Ryan Poles, was it your decision to do it? Do you have autonomy on the next coach? The answers will be absolutely yes. It was my decision and my decision only. That's what is going to be said. I see it coming already, because he's not going to admit that, oh, yeah, I got a little push from the outside, and maybe they'll say it was a collective decision. But here's the thing. I will question it, like if it's George McCaskey, if it's Ryan Poles, if it's Kevin Warren. I would question anybody who didn't think that this needed to happen now because of just 6 straight losses. We know that. The first half was embarrassing. The end of the game was embarrassing. And then maybe the most important part, how can you go on with this head coach after what those players were saying in the locker room after the game? And I'll just stick with Keenan Allen. We can go 4 or 5 deep on this, but Keenan Allen said, I think the players did enough to win the game yesterday. The locker room is gone. It is lost, and that's not hyperbole.
Grote, on my Uber back from Ford Field to the hotel on Thursday night, I could not shake the expressions of Kyler Gordon from my head. This is a guy we don't talk to a lot. And that 3-4 minute session that we had at his locker after the game was telling. It wasn't so much in what he said, it was the way he was saying things, where you were like, this team's done with this coach, right? Like you felt it. And then you went around the locker room, you heard from DJ and Cole and Keenan and others in that locker room, and you just realized that there was only one move that could be made here by the leaders at Haugh, which was to soothe the jangled nerves of this locker room that has experienced 6 consecutive losses, each one of them so grand with how they occurred that each one of them taken on their own would have merited a discussion on whether Matt Eberflus still deserved to keep his job. When they happen one after another, in succession, there's no choice. The thing that throws me here is that the Bears had essentially a layup on Friday. The entire football world watched what happened on Thursday and gave you permission to do what everyone knew was going to happen. Fire the head coach. And yet they somehow managed to do it in a clumsy enough fashion that I took 3 or 4 calls here today on Friday afternoon from people around the league questioning who's really calling the shots there. What does this mean for attracting head coaching candidates in January when we get to that stage of the process? And what does this say about the consistent dysfunction of the Bears organization that may be problematic as they try to do 2 things here, right? Hire a new coach and get it right for once. And also figure out how to regain or maintain the trust of Caleb Williams. Like, Grote, Caleb Williams went into the pre-draft process doing homework on why the Bears for the last 40 years haven't been able to sustain success or develop a quarterback. He was a little bit anxious about what this organization had to offer. And he had people, most notably Ryan Poles, tell him, we've got it under control. Those are missteps by previous regimes that we don't need to be held responsible for, but we've got you. We've got your back. And now 12 starts into his rookie season, they fired his offensive coordinator and his head coach 17 days apart. And they're asking him, trust us. We got you. Okay. If you're 23 years old and you've been through that in your first 6 months at a job, don't you start, as one former executive said to me today, walking around with your head on a swivel everywhere you go, fearful of what they're actually doing to put you in position to succeed?
It's unbelievable. Do we know Thomas Brown is still going to call the plays, I assume? Like, from
we don't know that, I guess, okay. Because part of this mechanically is Thomas Brown has been in the booth for the last 3 weeks. Well, guess what? You can't be the head coach of a football team from the booth. It doesn't happen. So now he's got to come from a place that he's comfortable in down to the sideline and then manage the entire game.
Manage the game. How's he supposed to manage the game? I mean, that's so. I think
so. Does Kerry Joseph become the play caller?
Right.
Does Thomas retain the play caller from the sideline? Like,
I surmised the same name on the score today. Like, I guess Kerry Joseph, come on up. But here's my bigger point, Dan, is that this will have been, because it would make sense that there'll be another play caller, his 3rd play caller, and it's in his first year.
I don't think
not even in
a
full season.
So through that lens, I think you have to keep Thomas Brown in that role,
right?
And you have to make the best of it.
Dan, it's plausible that starting next season, there'll be another play caller. And if it's not Thomas Brown, that's 4. That's 4. But
in your 18th start, you're on your 4th play caller, right?
4th play caller. So whatever questions Caleb Williams asked, it sounds like he was swindled a little bit with the or now he gets it. Now he gets it. What has been going on with the Chicago Bears with his predecessors. Maybe he now looks back at Justin Fields and Mitch Trubisky and, to a different degree, Jay Cutler, on why these quarterbacks didn't succeed. So yeah, he's got to be nervous. I guess my question to you is, do you think Caleb Williams should or will have any kind of say in this going forward in terms of the offensive coordinator? Does he deserve here's who we're going with? Yes. What do you think about this, Caleb?
Yes. They owe that to him. They drafted him number 1 overall and asked him to put his career in their hands. They owe it to him to try to make it work. We've seen already through 12 starts, Grote, that this kid has superstar potential. We watched it again in the second half Thursday at Ford Field against a Lions defense that at halftime hadn't given up a point in 12 quarters. Caleb Williams came back out in the second half, threw 3 touchdown passes, ripped the ball around the field, was doing the things that make you really feel like they are in a position to go places if they can get everything else around him correct. And so there's a sense that, like, oh my God, the Bears are close, but they're only close if they get this next hire completely right. And that's a real challenge for an organization that has never gotten it completely right, has so many times gotten it completely wrong. And now, by the way, also has to decide what the fate of their general manager is, because if you're going to advertise this job in week 19 and say it's open, which is obviously it's open now, and Thomas Brown will have his application in and an early audition to interview first, you have to convince people that the sand in Ryan Poles' hourglass isn't 2/3 gone. You know what I mean? If he's running now on borrowed time in 2025, and you're asking a head coach to sign up and, hey, come sign up and work for this GM who might not be here in a year. Well, now you've got the same type of dysfunctional problem that has always existed in this organization. And it's that the timelines never marry up. So that's a long-winded answer to the fact that Caleb Williams better have some input. He better have some things that he wants to see from that position, because guess what? If Caleb Williams doesn't work out as the quarterback here, everyone that is on board for the rest of his rookie contract, they're gone too.
Yeah. Which is part of why I'm not ready to hit the gas pedal on let's push Ryan Poles out or he doesn't deserve another shot. I still think, and look, the mistakes are starting to catch up with the good things that Ryan Poles has done for this organization, and he took it from scratch. I mean, there's no doubt this was a absolute rebuild. I like the way the roster looked to begin this season. I will raise my hand and admit that. I liked what he did. I liked the way it looked. I probably underestimated what was done on the offensive line going into this season, but I'm not ready. And yeah, look, he's the one that hired Matt Eberflus, or did he? Was he nudged in that direction because Trace Armstrong is the agent for both of those guys? I still am comfortable with just being around Ryan Poles and seeing the full breadth of work. I am still comfortable with Ryan Poles as the GM of this team. How about you?
Look, like I said on 670 The Score on Friday afternoon that we still have 5 football games to play. We were comfortable with Matt Eberflus and Shane Waldron when we left London 6 games ago. Life comes at you fast in the NFL, and these last 33 days have been head spinning. They've to be honest, Grote, they've been fucking astonishing. When you go back to the fact that the Bears stood on a football field in Washington on, let me get the date of that for you. It's October 27th, and they're 25 seconds away from their 5th win of the season. And here we are on the day after Thanksgiving, and they still haven't collected their 5th win. If that losing streak goes from 6 to 7 to 8 to 9 to 10 and 11, and if it goes from 6 to 7 to 8 to 9 to 10 and 11 in the fashion that it went from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6, I can't make any assurances that I want anybody in that building back, right? Because you have a losing football culture that is disjointed in every way. I like Ryan. I think he's got great vision for the position. I think he's done a lot of good things, but he made a major misstep last offseason in putting his faith in Matt Eberflus at a time when most people said, if you are going to bring back Matt Eberflus for 2024, you have to be convinced in your mind that you're also bringing him back for 2025, because you can't do what Chicago's grandest fear was and reboot your head coach and your coordinator after the rookie season of the number 1 overall pick, right? And here we are, right? Like, so like these things have to be accounted for. They have to be explained. There has to be accountability. There has to be troubleshooting suggestions on how they're not going to happen again. And the vision's got to be married up, So like to your question, sure, for now, maybe I'm okay with Ryan Poles sticking around, but like come knock on my door on the Monday after week 18 and let's see where this football team is at.
Yeah, I mean, and let's just keep it at this year. I mean, you go back and you look at the offensive line, not nearly as much has been or is invested in the offensive line as the defensive side of the ball. We can go through each guy there. The whole I know that the Velus-Jones thing seems like 2 years ago at this point, but that was symbolic. That's symbolic.
He's alive.
Yeah. Velus is, yes, that they tried everything they possibly could do to keep Velus-Jones Jr. around, mistake after mistake, botch after botch.
And then draft pick.
That's the draft. And, you go back and look at some of the draft picks of Ryan Poles, and, not a lot of them are necessarily thriving at this point.
So let's talk for 45 seconds about the offensive line. The position that Ryan Poles played, was supposed to fortify, and went into this season feeling more comfortable than he ever had before. The chaos on Thursday afternoon started when Larry Borum didn't hear the snap or didn't get the go call and let a free runner sack Caleb Williams for a loss that took the Bears beyond the 40-yard line and set off this chain reaction of chaos. Larry Borum is playing right tackle because Darnell Wright got hurt. Darnell Wright's preferred backup 12 weeks ago would have been Matt Pryor, who was forced inside to become a starting guard because Nate Davis was a bust. Matt Pryor's inside at starting guard, and the other guy that you drafted to develop into a swing tackle, Karan Amagaji, has been hurt from before his final season at Yale ended and has remained hurt, albeit for 50 snaps or whatever it's been that he's been able to play in his rookie season. My point is there's a ripple effect to all of these things. And when you make these minor miscalculations and these major errors in evaluation, they tend to have huge ripple effects. And we see that, right? Like Nate Davis busting as a free agent guard forces Matt Pryor into a role, which forces Larry Borum into a role, which forces your quarterback to get sacked, which forces your head coach to not call a timeout and play the butterfly effect here on all this, right? Like there it is. And so those types of things have to be answered for, right? Like they have to be answered for. You didn't set your team up for ideal success. And I think that the high level aggravation that exists in that locker room on Thursday afternoon was the fact that those players in that locker room know they should be a 7 or 8 win football team at this stage of the season and competing for a playoff berth. And they've just had an entire season of their professional livelihoods wasted.
Yeah. And I think it's one more point on the offensive line. It's kind of ironic that maybe your steadiest player on the offensive line this year has been Coleman Shelton, although he did go out yesterday and old Doug Kramer came in. But irony, because when training camp started, it sure felt like Ryan Bates was going to be your center on that team. But a lot of it goes back to your chain reaction here with the Nate Davis stuff. In
right, like
camp.
And Pryor might be your steadiest offensive lineman. He just hasn't been good at blocking on field goals, which has caused its own ripple effect, right? Like,
oh yeah.
And here we are, and like Velus Jones, who someone on your coaching staff sold you was going to be a high level special teams performer, took you out of the mix for a 3rd round pick 2.5 years ago, and now you still don't have a player to show for that. There's so much here, Grote, and that's why I say while the Bears are theoretically close, you don't understand what it takes to achieve high level sustained success when you constantly make all these missteps. I had a call this afternoon. There's some like jarring things coming from around the league today, and this was from someone that said they were laughing out loud at the idea that Caleb was being dropped into the most ideal position for a rookie quarterback that had ever existed. That was highly publicized throughout the offseason. And their rationale was there are four positions in an organization that you have to be firm and solid in to even think about competing for a championship. It's quarterback, it's head coach, it's general manager, and ownership. And this person said that no matter what the Bears roster looked like, you had an unproven and mostly mocked head coach starting his 3rd season after 2 terrible campaigns, a general manager who hadn't really achieved anything, and ownership that's traditionally looked at around the league as maybe a little bit flimsy, right? Like, and doesn't have the organizational chops to understand what it takes to compete at this level. This person said that if you start every July with a list of football teams and you just rank those 4 positions, quarterback, head coach, general manager, and ownership, 1 through 10, you'll know who's going to be playing in late January and early February.
That's wild.
The Bears aren't that. And they've got to become that soon. Ryan's got to become what Kevin Warren believes he can be. They've got to find a head coach that can marry up with this quarterback who seemingly has all the talent and potential in the world to emerge as one of those engines of championship drives. And then the ownership's got to figure out what they've been doing wrong for 45 years.
Last thing for today, and we'll get into some of the candidates and stuff like that.
I'm just getting rolling. Last thing. Come on,
I'm sorry, man. I have another appointment scheduled. I don't know about you, Dan, but I've been on I've been on the Score 3 times today. I was on Milwaukee radio. Yeah. I've got to go do television.
I've got a family that's wondering why the hell I've been locked in the office.
Yeah. So I mean, you're welcome to continue on with Adam Studzinski if you'd like. But for me, this is the last thing that I want to talk about today, and that is circling back to Thomas Brown, the interim head coach, who is staring down at San Fran, at Minnesota, home Detroit, home Seattle, at Green Bay. I'm going to keep an open mind about Thomas Brown, but as I sit here right now, it absolutely can't be Thomas Brown who becomes your head coach after the season is over. You cannot afford to take risks in this case. It would feel very Bears to do something like that. But I don't want to get into this thing where people are saying, Thomas Brown, because he speaks well and the aura is great and he commands a room. I need to know that somebody knows how to manage games for more than 5 games in a season. So that's my last thing today is Thomas Brown, open mind, but no.
I'll wrap it up quickly for you. I had someone suggest, what if Thomas Brown is your next Vic Fangio, which is the holdover from the previous staff that gives you stability. Matt Nagy rode Vic Fangio in his first season as coach
Oh,
to some
yeah.
high-level
Oh, yeah.
success. Vic
You
had
do all that. I'll take care of you. Do
right.
all
And
of that.
Vic turned that into a legitimate top 5 defense, not just a reputed top 5 defense. And the Bears won a division championship and rolled. The problem with that to me is it would mean you would have to hire a defensive-minded head coach. And I think in this instance, you want to find yourself an offensive-minded head coach. An offensive-minded head coach is not going to come in and say, hey, you know what? We're going to let Thomas Brown stick around here after being an interim head coach and continue calling our plays and be in that role. And so this is just what it is. And I feel badly for Thomas Brown. He's got a great opportunity here, but I feel badly for him. For the second year in a row, he's been thrust into an absolutely gross mess and asked to get the mop in the bucket and clean it up. I like him. I really appreciate his charisma, his leadership, all the things we talked about before we left for Detroit. I hope he does well over these next 5 weeks. I hope we have one normal week here before we get through the end of the 2024 calendar year. But I'm with you. I think the reboot has to occur when you get into the first couple weeks of January, and you look like you've got time now to really narrow your candidate list down and understand who's in play for you and who you want to target as your primary options when this coaching search begins in earnest.
Dan, anything else you want to drop? Another F-bomb? I know that had to feel good for you. Yeah, there he is. There he is. We've been
what a Friday.
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah, so here we are. It happened. Oh my God, it happened. Matt Eberflus was fired, and that's that. Thanks to everybody.
He might still be getting ready for San Francisco for all we know.
It sure sounded like it. Oh man, thank you so much for being on this journey with us here. I mean, this is just it's amazing, and I'm sorry we don't talk much football on this podcast lately, but it is what it is. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking. It means a lot. It gives us more resources as well to broadcast out to you. And so for Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune and frequent contributor on 670 The Score, for Adam Stasinski, the executive producer of Take the North and also the executive producer of the Bernstein and Harris Show, I am Mark Grote saying thank you for taking part in the Take the North podcast.
Great talk. See you out there.
Cheers.